Thank you. Ms. Jacobs is recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Secretary Wormuth and General McConville for being here with us. I want to start with you, Secretary Wormuth. The Optionally Manned Fighting Vehicle is the first of several vehicle modernization programs the Army is developing. What lessons were learned from last year's cancellation of the initial solicitation, specifically with the requirements process, and how can we do better with requirements early in these programs?
Thank you, Congresswoman. I think the optionally manned fighting vehicle is a good example of how, as I've come into this role, how the Army is approaching modernization and its acquisition efforts differently than we have in the past. So unlike the Future Combat System, for example, where we loaded up a lot of requirements very early in the process and were perhaps somewhat unrealistic about what was technologically possible, with ONFV, we're trying to do it in a much more incremental, iterative way. So first, we went out and we did market research to understand, what might be possible, what kinds of producers might be out there. We then engaged in conversation with industry about what kinds of characteristics we're looking for in the optionally manned fighting vehicle. We then, moved incrementally to looking at potentially what designs will be out there, and we're going to again continue to pursue this iterative approach which first of all gives more opportunity for more companies in the private sector to compete, but also will give us a better sense of what's actually possible and achievable before we down select. So I think actually we've learned a lot and feel good about the path that we're on right now with ONFV.
Thank you. General McConville, anything to add before I move on to the next topic?
No, I think when we talk about transformation, we are transforming the way we actually buy weapon systems. And what we're finding is by going to characteristics, vice requirements early on in the process, we encourage innovation, we get other people to participate in the process, and as we move forward, we actually get to drive before we buy or fly before we buy, which we think is a much better approach.
Thank you. I'd now like to discuss the long-range precision fires. I know we've talked about it a few times already, and it was in your written testimony, but I wanted to drill down a bit further. How do you see these non-strategic hypersonic weapons playing a role in the battlefield of the future? Specifically, their long-range nature will completely change the way the Army needs to collect targeting information. And has the Army adequately thought about the way sensors will need to be connected to shooters in order to make these new weapons effective?
Congresswoman, a couple comments on that. First of all, I think long-range precision fires are really essential for the Army, but frankly for the entire Joint Force in terms of helping us address the anti-access area denial challenges that both China and Russia present to us. And I think it's important to not forget about the European theater and about the challenges we face from Russia. There is a lot of appropriate emphasis on China, but we need to remember the European theater as well. And the programs that we're pursuing here, whether it's long-range hypersonic weapon or PRISM or the extended range cannon, those are all weapon systems that will allow us to hit targets from much longer standoff distances. And in terms to your very important point about connecting sensors to shooters, we're really trying to use our Project Convergence initiative, which is sort of our campaign of learning, to try to help us understand how we can use these capabilities, how we can work with the other services to use our sensors to connect to the best shooters for a particular target. And we have a joint board of directors for our Project Convergence initiative that allows us to bring in all of the services to our efforts so that we can explore those issues. And the Chief may want to add something.
Yeah, I think the Secretary laid up the only thing long-range precision fires require long-range targeting and precision targeting, and we're certainly developing the capabilities to do that within the Joint Force, and that's what we're having the discussion about, who is actually going to do that targeting and what's the best way to do that.
Well, thank you. And in my final 20 seconds, I'll just echo my colleagues' encouragement to make sure we're addressing housing and continuing to execute the Army Housing Campaign Plan And I too was on the Codell to Fort Hood and encourage you to continue working on sexual assault. And Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Green.